Hey Cities Church, in this video we are in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and much like many of the chapters before this one, there are so many things in this chapter that we could pull out and use as an exhortation. But I want to hone in on one thing from this chapter, and I think it's something that gives us some insights into the life and heart of the Apostle Paul. It gives us some insight into how much the Apostle Paul loved all of the churches that he had planted and the churches that had been springing up. We see this in other parts of the New Testament. We see where Paul has desperate love for people. We see this in his letter to Timothy and his letter to Titus. The language he uses to describe what he thinks about and what he feels about Timothy and Titus is just absolutely beautiful. We see this in various epistles where he talks about his concern for churches. We see this when he writes to the Thessalonians. The language he uses for them, about his love for them, it's amazing. We see this probably the most in his letter to Philemon. We see his love for Onesimus and his love for Philemon on display, and it is just incredible. It's obvious that the Apostle Paul has great doctrine, but it's also obvious that his doctrine is informing his love and concern for people. And we see in moments throughout the New Testament, Paul has this desperate, passionate love for people. And there's this moment here in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 where we see Paul having great concern for the churches. As we travel through this letter, we get to this moment in this chapter where the Apostle Paul starts talking about all the things he's been through, all the trials and tribulations and the persecutions and oppressions, the difficulties he has faced. He talks about how on 5 different occasions he got the 40 lashes minus 1. If you don't know what that is, basically it was an extreme beating. He was whipped and beat so bad that he was basically almost dead. In fact, the 40 lashes minus 1 was the worst type of beating you were legally allowed to give someone. Well, Paul got that kind of beating 5 different times in his life, on 5 different occasions. He talks about being beaten with rods on 3 different occasions. He talks about how once he was stoned. He was shipwrecked at least 3 times. He talks about how he was lost at sea for 1 whole day, 1 whole night. He talks about being in danger from robbers, being in danger from rivers, being in danger from people who are lying, people who would try to attack him or manipulate, false brothers. He was in trouble or in danger from Jews and from Gentiles. He says. He talks about having multiple sleepless nights, being hungry, being thirsty, suffering from exposure. He just goes down the list of all these things that he's faced in his life, all these difficulties, these incredible things that he has suffered for the sake of the gospel. These things have come his way because of his endeavors to preach the gospel and plant churches. His willingness to endure all these things because he loved people and he wanted them to hear about Jesus. At the end of this list, however, he includes something that I think is a little bit odd, if I'm honest. When I first read this many years ago, I thought to myself, that doesn't fit. Like, one of these things don't belong here. It's kind of like that. And it's when Paul says this thing, he says, and every day, so on top of all the things I've suffered, I also face the daily burden for the concern I have for churches. One translation says that the daily burden of the anxiety I feel for all the churches. Another translation says the daily burden I have because of all of the concern I have for the churches. You can see Paul has this incredible burden he's feeling for the churches that he has planted and the churches that are springing up all over the known world. He is feeling this anxiety well up inside of him because he loves them so much. I can just imagine Paul waking up in the morning and wondering, I wonder how the Thessalonians are doing. I wonder how my brothers in Ephesus are doing. He's concerned for them. You could almost sense like he's crying for them. He's concerned for them. He's wondering, are they going to be okay? Are they going to be able to stand against the schemes of the enemy? Are there going to be false prophets coming in and causing difficulties? Are there going to be fractures? Are they going to stay united? Are there going to be wolves in sheep clothing coming in and causing problems in the churches? Are there going to be government officials coming in and causing pain and persecutions in the lives of those I love? You can just tell he is concerned, and the pain he feels, the anxiety, the angst he feels is comparable to some extent, at least it's on the same list as horrific beatings and being stoned. You're getting stonings and being beaten with rods and being shipwrecked. Like, the Apostle Paul is putting it on the same list. And it just dawns on me that the Apostle Paul would not put that on the list unless he had just incredible love for people. Like, you don't feel that kind of concern for people unless you desperately love them. If I'm honest, I've ministered in previous churches. I've lived in different parts of the country, and I've been in vocational ministry. I got to be honest. I go weeks, if not months, at a time without even thinking about previous places I've lived, and I go weeks or months at a time without feeling any concern for people I've previously ministered with and ministered to. And what I feel is drastically different than what I see Paul feeling in this moment. Paul clearly loves the churches. Obviously, he had planted these churches. He has spent time there. When I think about my love for people, the love I have for people around me or people in my past, I got to be honest, it doesn't seem to compare to the love that Paul has for people. Paul seems to love people way more than I do. But I want to love like that. I do. I want to love the way Paul loves. I don't love that way today, but I want to. And I'm going to ask God for the grace to walk that out in my life. And that's what I would encourage you to do as well. Ask yourself honestly, take inventory of your own heart and mind. Do you love people so much, you are so deeply concerned for them, that it causes anxiety to well up inside of you? That's the kind of love Paul had. That's the kind of love I want to have. That's the kind of love I want everyone in our church to have. So City's Church, this is my exhortation to you. If you don't love that way, do one of two things, or do two things. One, repent. That's what I'm doing these days. The second thing I do is I ask God for the grace and the ability to love the way Paul did. And that's what I've been praying for. God, give me the love that Paul had. I want to have Pauline love for people. I want to love people so much that I have that kind of concern for them. So God, forgive me for not loving that way. And God, please give me the grace, give me the ability, transform my heart, change my paradigm, implant in me Pauline-type love.